743.
All right, it's the week of the NFL Combine. The NFL's done an incredible job of making every month matter, not just during the season, but throughout the offseason. The NFL Combine, and then eventually Pro Day, and then eventually, of course, the NFL Draft as well. The schedule release and everything else in between. John McClain, Hall of Fame writer, covers the NFL like a book with us on Sikkim 365 Radio. And, John, it is the week of the NFL Combine, and I know that it's maybe changed just a little bit, tweaked a little bit. What is when you say the priority of what a scout or personnel person wants, what would be the priorities of the 2 or 3 things they have to see?
First of all, let me say, how about those fighting Baylor Bears, the men and women? The men kicking some Bevo butt and the women embarrassing Iowa State. What a great few days it's been for both Baylor basketball teams. And right now I'm just so angry at Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. It just makes me sick. So tired of everything, excuse me, about their negotiations being about greed and money and nothing about making the game better. As far as the Combine, Gary Kubiak always said that he valued the most the 15 minutes you could get with 60 prospects. Look them in the eye. He learned more from that because he said, I can see everything else on tape. To me, it is ridiculous when you see these broadcasters breathlessly talk about a guy making a great catch or a great throw. If you don't make great throws and catches, something's wrong. There's nobody covering you. There's nobody pressuring you. Everybody wants to see the speed, of course. Everybody wants to see how much somebody can bench. But one thing I learned from going 34 of those in a row, the strongest guys seldom make it, and the fastest guys seldom make it. And I'm not talking about, say, guys that run in the 4.3s. I'm talking about somebody that cracks it.
Yeah, John, I'm trying to find it, but I saw an infographic. I want to say it was from Pro Football Focus this morning, and listed the top 10 best combine times ever. And the one player that came out of the top 10 that was any good was Chris Johnson. That was it. And
he, of course, was a 2,000-yard rusher for the Titans. And electronic timing is all I trust. When you guys start watching NFL Network, when the players start working out this week, later in the week, right now, interviews started today with coaches and general managers, and players start tomorrow. And I'm so excited that there's 7 Baylor players there. I can't ever remember anybody being more. I'm doing a story column on Jalen Pitre and why they should put a statue of him outside McClain Stadium for Sunday. And the speed thing, they don't put as much stock in it as they used to because they get track coaches to help prepare them for their starts and the way they spread. And one of the dumbest things in the world is watching a lineman run 40 yards. The only time you ever see an offensive lineman run 40 yards, he's trying to chase a defensive guy who's picked up a fumble or intercepted a pass. And the same thing about a defensive lineman. They're more interested in how explosive they are out of their stance of what they do the first 10 yards. And that's always the most fascinating to me.
John, I'm asking this. I really don't know. I mean, was there anything, I know that Nick Caserio talked, was there anything of interest that came from his pre-combine media session?
Well, I didn't fall asleep, Greg. That was a big deal. A lot of those interviews, media from around the country that doesn't know certain things. Mm-hmm. Like he was asked why Lovie Smith over Brian Flores. Well, he gave the political answer, which is I had to do what I thought was best for the team, and I thought Lovie was the best for the team at that point. And even though he worked with Flores for years in New England, and Flores was a finalist, but Flores wasn't going to get the job. If he sues the Texans saying he didn't get the job because of the lawsuit, that's not right. Josh McCown was getting that job.
Let's go back to Jalen Pitre. You mentioned that, and the fact we know the story. He's the only one that remained committed to Baylor, and he wasn't really recruited heavily or whatever, and he turned out to be an All-American, and I mean a damn good player as well. Where is he in the thought process, you think, as an NFL prospect? Is he a second-day guy?
Right now, everybody looks at him as a second-round pick. And, I looked it up since I'm writing about him. And you helped me with Kellen Mond, all those guys that bailed on Baylor. It's amazing. Devin Duvernay's been in the NFL for the last 2 years, and Jalen Pitre is still just now coming out of college. And the fact that he was a 3-star recruit who kept getting better. And I kept looking at him, man, he's small for a safety. And he is small for a safety. And he'll be one of those that they use around the line of scrimmage. He reminds me so much of Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu's small, he plays back, he plays up. And the thing that impressed me the most about Pitre is tackles for loss. And, he's going to be hitting guys that are bigger and faster and stronger, but he's just one of those, and you guys know it, he has a nose for the football. And they'll worry about him staying healthy at his size, but right now he's going in the second round. And they've got, they're going to have at least in all those corners they've got here, those guys will get drafted. It's just this should be a great draft for Baylor players. And Jalen Pitre, when it comes to safeties, I would think he'd be one of Baylor's all-time best.
How much does that comp you had of Tyrann Mathieu and Budda Baker's not very big either, and he is a holy terror for offenses as well. So now there's guys you can point to and go, well, look, I mean, they're headaches. Like we can have one of our own.
That's a great example. Budda Baker, I'd forgotten about him. He's another little guy. He can run like crazy. I'm interested to see what Pitre runs. And if he doesn't run well, he can run at Baylor's Pro Day. Or if he decides not to. It's a chance. The Senior Bowl is a great time to impress NFL coaches. The Combine is too. If you do something at the Combine and you don't do it well, you got a chance to do it again at your Pro Day. Say Pitre was projected to run a 4.6 and he ran a 4.53. Then he didn't need to run again. That's plenty for a safety. And I'm really eager to see how the other guys work out and then how they do it at Pro Day as well, because as you guys know, I get this everywhere I go. Like I'll be waiting to do a talk show or a TV show, and while we're killing time, this happened on NFL Network last week when the guy goes, "Hey, you went to Baylor, right? Yeah, man, can you believe Baylor this? And that was a guy from NFL Network, and I get that from people all over the country. And when I respond with pride.
I bet you do. I know you are. You do. I mean, go ahead, Craig.
John, I'm reading through various headlines. It's kind of the typical combine time, pre-draft time to basically say everything's open for business, right? I mean, I'm seeing Jags, the number 1 pick's open for business. Falcons are talking about Matt Ryan's future. It seems like there's a lot of quarterbacks sort of in flux now, but is that mostly just talk and contract related, or do you think there's actually some big moves that are potentially in store this offseason?
Well, I don't think, as I've said for 2 years, I don't think Aaron Rodgers leaving Green Bay. He'll get a contract extension. Russell Wilson seems to finally quieted the masses who think he wants out because he never said anything but he wants to be back the last time at the Super Bowl. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo came out going to have shoulder surgery, and that's scary. It reminds me of Drew Brees. And I do a weekly show on Outkick.com, and I told them today, imagine what would have happened when Nick Saban went to Miami, the Dolphins, and in hindsight, he claims he wanted Drew Brees. The GM at the time, Randy Mueller, gave him Dante Culpepper coming off a knee injury, and it led to Saban going to Alabama. What if the Dolphins had got Drew Brees? Who would have gone to Alabama? It wouldn't have been Nick Saban. Think all these other teams that would have won national championships because Saban was still coaching in the NFL.
Yeah, it would be fun, and I think we do this, and Paul, you're next, but how you just take a player and how so many things could change because of a trade, free agency, somebody else, what coach would be where. It's incredible.
I I'm sorry, David. I have a great story for y'all. 1982, the Oilers won one game in a strike-torn season. The Colts had no win, or they had one tie, and they got the first pick, and they took John Elway, even though he told them, don't do it, and he forced the trade to the Broncos. Well, the Oilers got a win that year, and it was tainted. The official made a bad call. The Oilers should have been winless. They would have gotten John Elway. And we asked Elway, would you have come to Houston? He said yes. He didn't want to go to Baltimore and play for Frank Cush, who was like a drill sergeant. So think about that. Elway would have come to Houston. Denver wouldn't have won Super Bowls. Warren Moon would have not come to Houston as a free agent the following year. So one little decision by an official changed course of NFL history in 3 cities.
Man, John, a lot going on with Dan Snyder and the mess that is the Washington Commanders right now. Jerry Jones had the Rich Dalrymple situation pop up, which has seemed to the Cowboys have kind of backed away from it, deftly as they normally do. Comparing what happened with Jerry Richardson and how he was forced to sell the Panthers with what's going on with Dan Snyder, why is the league not fed up with Dan Snyder?
Well, first of all, Richardson was not forced to sell. He sold. He got tired of it. He didn't want an investigation. He'd already fired his 2 sons from the front office, so he just sold it. And that came from a Sports Illustrated story where he spent a lot of time telling women how good they looked, demanding they dress a certain way, and people addressed him as Mr., not Mr. Richardson, but Mr. And so he quickly sold and got multiple $1 billion for his franchise from David Tepper. Now, what bothers me, I think I just read yesterday that Washington is in the running for the draft. Why in the world would you honor Washington with the draft and have Dan Snyder as the host owner? Because the host owner gets a lot of attention around the draft. That, to me, is preposterous. Now, if it is proved that Stephen Ross asked Brian Flores to tank games, and Flores has proof like he claims he does, you're messing with the owner's income. They're making a fortune off gambling now. If gamblers think that these games are not on the up and up, they're not going to be gambling. So I can definitely see them trying to force out Stephen Ross. You know, the sexual misconduct and all of that controversy in Washington should have forced Snyder out, but it hasn't because it doesn't hit him in the pocketbook. But Stephen Ross could hit him where it hurts. And I think if you do try to force an owner to sell, it's got to be a 3/4 majority, and it's never happened in the NFL.
Yeah, I just saw Washington in the running along with, Detroit and Green Bay for the 2024 NFL Draft.
I'd be all about Green Bay. I think that'd be cool to, highlight one of the smallest city in the NFL.
NFL would be tremendous, but, no offense to Detroit, I don't think so. And Washington certainly would not deserve it.
So, John, we started off, you had a little bit to say about baseball. I don't know if you have any more left to say, but we were talking about it earlier. I don't know if there's an owner in pro or a commissioner in pro sports that seems to like his sport less than Rob Manfred does. And obviously down at Houston, there's always Astros fever going on these last few years. So does baseball realize kind of like where it is in the pecking order, or does it just not matter and they just don't care?
Well, the income goes up all the time, and the union runs baseball. The union runs basketball. The owners run the NFL. That's why they get 10-year collective bargaining agreements, and the others get 5 years, and that's got to drive Rob Manfred crazy. But the owners and the players proved before. The players would strike. They would strike a season. They would sit out because they're unified, and NFL players proved they would cross the picket line. So they haven't had one since 1987.
If you think about all we seem to do now, instead of just like that one weekend in the NFL playoffs or two that were so dramatic and fun and amazing, exhilarating, gut-wrenching and all that, excruciating, we seem to spend so much time now in sports discussing off the field or controversial or legal or strikes or whatever else.
unfortunately, but, when the games are actually played, you can't beat it. And right now, baseball, fans will come back. Fans like us who've been around a while, I'll always love baseball. But baseball is turning off younger people. That's what everybody wants. All advertisers, people that pay the money, the gamblers, they want the young people. And they're losing the young people by not playing. And the game is so dull. They start playoff games too late. They last into the night. The games are too slow, too many relief pitchers. And I saw this written by one of the greatest baseball writers, Jason Stark, wrote this 2 weeks ago. They could learn something from football. What if the last drive for the Rams and the Bengals, they pulled Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow and brought in the backup? Well, what does it have to do with baseball? Well, they pull the starters and they bring in some setup guy who's not nearly as good as the starters. And it didn't used to be that way. But baseball never thinks about trying to improve the product when it comes to the CBA. And like adding more playoff teams would elevate the excitement for fan bases, but the players won't do it because they say if that was the case, they wouldn't be making as many trades and paying as much money because it'd be too easy to get in the playoffs.
John, it's been a hell of a run for Baylor, no question. And now in men's and women's basketball, the wins, as you've mentioned, I know you're thrilled. Thanks for your time.
Guys, thank you very much. And stick 'em.
Stick 'em.
Yeah, that's a great point he brings up that I wasn't thinking about in relation to the NFL versus MLB as a union factor. That's definitely as big of a factor as any playing into it. But, yeah, still disappointing and still not great news, I don't think, for the game of baseball ultimately. And I don't think they're, in danger of going extinct anytime soon. But I do think they're in danger of losing more and more fans, especially the longer the lockout lasts. If they're approaching 4 weeks, 6 weeks in, and then all of a sudden, oh, here we're back again. I just don't think people are going to be. I'm sure baseball hardcores will be excited by it, but a lot of it too is that hardcore base is dwindling because that hardcore base is getting older now, and they're not replacing it with younger fans, and that's a big problem for them. But they must know what they're doing, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens, but not good news for baseball fans today.
Not at all, and yet it seems like there's always a labor strife or some sort of something controversy. And again, that might just be because so much social media that is publicized and discussed, and shows like even ours and others. When we come back, by the way, this week's Bearcast with